Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really core to our existence. Human identification. A fascinating question from one of you. It actually sparked this whole exploration. It's a real journey into understanding ourselves, our identities, and, well, what it even means to be a person.
Yeah, and we have a truly rich set of sources to dig into here. The main one, AI and the fabric of human identity, takes this really compelling interdisciplinary look, even bringing in AI perspectives.
Exactly. So our goal today, really, is to navigate this intricate idea, what makes us human, how we see ourselves, others, and, intriguingly, what role AI might play in all this.
Right.
Okay, let's get into it. We should probably start with the basics, the foundations of human identification.
Good idea.
Think of it like an umbrella term, maybe. It covers our self-awareness, all the layers of identity, and that really profound concept of personhood.
That's a helpful way to picture it, definitely. And each one of those brings up its own fascinating questions.
Right.
Maybe start with self-awareness. That basic capacity to be conscious of yourself, your personality, traits, feelings, actions.
Yeah, and it's not like it just switches on.
Right.
It develops. The source talks about levels.
Stages.
Starting with just knowing you're separate from, the chair you're sitting on.
Differentiation, yeah.
Then recognizing yourself in a mirror, that classic mark test.
Right, where a toddler sees the mark and touches their own face, not the mirror.
Yeah.
Usually around 18 to 24 months.
And then permanence, knowing that baby picture is still you.
And finally, meta self-awareness. Realizing other people have thoughts about you.
Wow, quite a progression.
It is. And what's interesting, you mentioned the mark test timeline. Well, there's actually some cultural variation there.
Oh.
Yes, suggesting that, while biology is obviously involved, our social world starts shaping this really core sense of self right from the get-go.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's self-awareness. What about identity? That feels like the next piece.
Right, identity, that whole collection of qualities, characteristics, everything that defines you or a group.
And the source breaks it down, right?
Yeah.
Personal identity.
Yep. Your unique life story, your traits, experiences, the stuff that feels like you over time, it brings Locke to mind, doesn't it? Consciousness and memory making you, you.
It really does. That continuous stream.
Yeah.
Okay, so personal identity, then role identity.
Exactly. How you act, how people see you in specific roles, like being a parent, a friend, a colleague.
Defined by interactions.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then social identity, that comes from belonging to groups.
The us and them stuff.
Pretty much. Categorizing ourselves, identifying with our groups or in-groups, and comparing them to out-groups, it's fundamental.
And linked to self-esteem, too, often.
Definitely. And finally, there's collective identity, that deeper shared we-ness.
Like in social movements.
Yeah, exactly. People uniting around common goals, a shared purpose, it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, got it. Self-awareness, identity. The last piece was personhood.
Personhood. And this is where it gets really thought-provoking. It's about the status of being a person.
Which has huge implications, right? Legal, philosophical, moral.
Immense. And, as the source points out, nailing down a definition, that's a whole ongoing debate.
I can imagine.
Yeah, you've got historical takes like Boethius focusing on rationality.
Rational thought as the key.
Right. Or Locke, again, emphasizing consciousness. Taylor talks about significance, things mattering to you. Beckwith suggests an underlying unity. Compritus highlights relationships.
Wow. Okay, so it's not straightforward.
Not at all. It's kind of a spectrum. Is personhood inherent just by being human? That's sort of the existential view. Or is it relational based on social recognition?
And they all feel so connected, don't they? Like you need some self-awareness to even start building an identity. And that identity is shaped by your roles in groups. And then whether someone gets personhood often seems tied to having things like self-awareness.
Precisely. They're deeply interwoven. And it's useful to remember that distinction between numerical identity.
Being the exact same thing over time.
Yeah. Versus qualitative identity, just sharing properties. Like, are you the same person you were 10 years ago? We wrestle with numerical identity even though the qualities change.
That's a great distinction. And this whole area of human identification, it's not just abstract, is it? It affects everyone.
Absolutely everyone across genders, ages, cultures, throughout our lives.
Though how it plays out might look different.
Oh, definitely. The basic trajectory might have common threads, but how these things manifest, the values tied to them, that can vary dramatically depending on culture and context.
Right. So the mission here for this deep dive is really to pull together this AI-informed perspective from the source, mix in knowledge from all these fields,
Synthesize it.
and give you, the listener, a clearer map of this complex thing we call human identification.
Sounds like a plan. So we've got the landscape. Where does this capacity even come from? How does it develop?
Good question. The evolutionary roots seem like the place to start.
Yeah, the source points to some fascinating possibilities there.
It kind of makes intuitive sense, doesn't it? Self-awareness, theory of mind.
That ability to know others have minds.
Right. And social identity. These things probably gave our ancestors a real edge in those complex early societies.
Absolutely, especially theory of mind. Think about cooperation, communication.
Crucial for hunting together, sharing food.
You need to grasp what the other person intends or needs. It's vital.
And self-awareness likely evolved right alongside it. You almost need a model of your own mind to understand someone else's.
Plausibly, yes. Plus, think about self-conscious emotions, shame, guilt, pride. They help regulate social behavior.
Keep you in line with the group norms.
Exactly. And that mental time travel self-awareness gives us thinking about the past, planning for the future, a huge advantage.
For sure. And social identity would boost all that. Sharing resources, defense.
Collective defense, mating opportunities, yeah. It all reinforces group cohesion. Dunbar's social brain hypothesis fits right in here.
The idea that our big brains are linked to complex social lives.
Especially the neocortex size. And theory of mind is key for navigating those social webs.
The source mentions other key thinkers too, right? Dunbar, obviously.
Tomasello on shared intentionality, that uniquely human collaboration.
Buss on evolutionary pressures shaping behavior. Tinker on language.
Right, and you see this feedback loop emerging. More complex societies demand more sophisticated cognitive tools.
Like theory of mind, self-awareness.
Which then allows for even more complex social structures. It's co-evolution.
Okay, so evolution sets the stage. But what about our biology now? Genetics.
Well, things like temperament, basic personality traits, they definitely have a significant genetic component.
Like how outgoing or reactive we are.
Exactly. Heritability estimates vary, but genetics plays a role, not single genes dictating everything, mind you.
More like a complex interplay.
Precisely. Lots of gene variations interacting. The source gives examples, genes linked to novelty-seeking, self-discipline, even anxiety.
So genes don't write our whole identity script, but they kind of sketch out the initial character, provide the raw materials.
That's a good way to put it. They lay down predispositions. And neurobiologically, we see specific brain areas lighting up for self-awareness and theory of mind.
Like the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, the MPFC, also areas like the posterior STS, precuneus, and the default mode network for self-referential thought. Prefrontal cortex maturation is absolutely critical here through childhood and adolescence.
And it's not just the brain in a vat, right? The mind-body connection.
Crucial. The source emphasizes that human identification is embodied. Physical health affects mental state. Mental health affects physical state. It's bidirectional.
Which ties back to that listener interest in vitamins and nutrition.
Yeah.
Basic physical well-being underpins psychological health and our sense of self.
Absolutely. And then there's epigenetics, how environment influences gene activity. Turning genes on or off. That adds another layer of complexity, shaping identity through experience.
Wow. Okay, so evolution biology.
Yeah.
How does this all unfold as we grow up? The developmental path.
Right. Well, early self-awareness follows a kind of pattern, those neo-piegeation levels.
Starting with just knowing you're separate from the world.
Differentiation, yeah. Then that key moment, mirror recognition, the mark test.
Around 18 to 24 months, usually. Such a simple yet profound indicator.
It really is. After that, kids start recognizing themselves in old photos, videos, understanding self-continuity.
And then the meta level, knowing others have thoughts about you.
Right. And Freud's ideas about identification also play a role in those early years.
That initial bond with caregivers, then later internalizing specific traits from others.
Exactly. Primary, narcissistic, partial identification. They all contribute to personality formation early on.
And adolescence becomes this really key time for pulling it all together.
Hugely critical. Erickson's identity versus role confusion stage captures it well. You're scrutinizing values, exploring possibilities, trying to commit to a sense of who you are.
And Maslow's hierarchy fits in here too, doesn't it? Basic needs first. Physiological, safety.
So before you can really focus on identity stuff like self-esteem, self-actualization. Precisely. So that listener interest in feeling good all the time, well, that sits higher up. It needs that foundation of basic needs met.
Which kind of emphasizes that this whole experiment of life just Surviving and trying to have quality of life is tied up with these motivations.
Which in turn support developing our human identification.
So it's this incredibly intricate path from our deep past through our biology to these developmental stages just to arrive at ourselves.
It truly is. And now maybe we shift focus to the philosophical side, because the nature of the self, that's been a massive question for thinkers forever.
Right. Back to the ancient Greeks, know thyself.
The Delphic maxim, yeah. Socrates, Plato, and the eternal soul, Aristotle focusing on rational thought as our essence. They laid the groundwork.
Then the Enlightenment really shifted things, didn't it? More focus on the individual.
Definitely. Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Putting self-consciousness front and center. And Locke arguing identity lies in continuous consciousness and memory, not some unchanging soul.
But not everyone agreed. Hume couldn't find a stable self, just perception.
A bundle of perceptions, yeah.
Yeah.
Always changing. And Kant proposed that transcendental ego, something necessary for experience, even if we can't directly grasp it.
You can really see the shift over time from something external or metaphysical to something more internal, psychological.
Exactly. Even moving from thinking about character tied to social roles to personality, focusing on unique inner traits that reflects this big change.
Which brings us back to personhood again, defining who counts as a person. So tied to rights, morality.
Absolutely critical. And we touched on the debates. Is it existential, just inherent in being human?
Or relational, granted by society, by interaction.
And is it about having some underlying substance or meeting functional criteria like rationality, consciousness, moral capacity?
Huge philosophical arguments with real-world consequences.
Definitely. And you have others weighing in, Taylor on significance, Heidegger on being in the world, Frankfurt on free will.
And through the Enlightenment, it seems self-consciousness really became the dominant idea, replacing the rational soul.
Largely, yes. And today, ideas like self-determination, authenticity are often emphasized. These aren't just abstract debates. They underpin legal rights, ethical treatment, even concepts like dehumanization.
Absolutely. And phenomenology offers another angle, right? Focusing on the lived experience of being a self.
Exactly. The direct subjective experience, erlebnis, and that core idea of intentionality. Consciousness is always of something.
And different phenomenologists highlighted different aspects.
Right. Husserl on the transcendental ego, Heidegger on Dasein and time, Sartre on pre-reflective awareness and the look of the other.
How being seen by others shapes us.
And Merleau-Ponty emphasizing embodiment, experiencing ourselves through our bodies.
So phenomenology connects the abstract ideas to how it actually feels to be us, day to day.
It's a crucial bridge, yeah. Moving beyond a static self to a dynamic process of experience.
Now, the source also brings in logic, math, physics, which seems like a leap. How do they relate to identity?
Well, in logic and math, identity is precise. AA, Leibniz's law. If two things are identical, they share all properties.
And that numerical versus qualitative distinction again, being the same one versus being alike.
Exactly. Like identical twins are qualitatively similar but numerically distinct. Math uses identity in equations. You could even make a loose analogy to set theory, the self as a set defined by its contents, memories, beliefs.
And those paradoxes.
Yeah.
The liar paradox, ship of Theseus.
They really mess with our intuitions about sameness over time, don't they? If you replace every plank, is it the same ship? Makes you think about our identity through constant change.
Definitely. And the precision of logic feels so different from our fluid human identity.
It does, but maybe those self-referenced paradoxes are actually a decent analogy for our own self-awareness, which is inherently self-referential.
Interesting. In physics?
Well, there's the observer effect in quantum mechanics, though that's often overinterpreted and leads to speculation about consciousness.
So the main view is materialist. Consciousness emerging from the brain.
That's the dominant view, yeah. Mind-brain identity theory. Consciousness as an emergent property of complex matter, though there are alternative views like idealism or panpsychism.
So logic and physics offer conceptual tools, highlighting fundamental questions about sameness, change, reality itself, which echo in our questions about human identity.
Precisely. Okay, shifting gears again, let's dive into how psychology tackles human identification.
Right. Psychology gets into the nitty-gritty, the mechanisms, the functions, like self-awareness theory.
Yuval and Wickland, yeah. The idea that focusing on ourselves makes us compare our behavior to our internal standards.
Which can ramp up emotions and push us to self-regulate, try to match our ideals.
Exactly. It shows self-awareness isn't passive, it's active, evaluative.
And those developmental levels we discussed, psychology maps that progression in detail. and links it to metacognition.
Thinking about thinking. Yeah, self-awareness is tied into our broader cognitive abilities, our intelligence.
And all the theories of identity itself, personal, role, social, collective.
Right. Identity as these stable-ish patterns of behavior, emotion, thought, evolving through life, shaped by everything from preferences to experiences. And people often prefer their own labels for themselves, too.
And social identity theory is huge here, right?
Mhm.
Categorization, identification with groups for self-esteem, comparison.
Toshville and Turner, yeah. It's a powerful framework for understanding group behavior, that us versus them dynamic.
And we shouldn't forget Freud's ideas about identification again, how we internalize others, especially early on.
Still influential in understanding personality formation, definitely.
Okay, what about the skills needed for navigating all this? Emotional intelligence, empathy, theory of mind?
Foundational. Absolutely foundational. Emotional intelligence, understanding and managing your own emotions, reading others' emotions, vital for relationships, social navigation.
And empathy, feeling with others, understanding their perspective, seems crucial for morality.
Hugely. Both emotional empathy, feeling their feelings, and cognitive empathy, understanding their viewpoint. Theories suggest it involves things like mirror neurons or perspective taking.
And theory of mind underlies so much of this, knowing others have different thoughts, beliefs, intentions, critical for interaction.
Absolutely. And all these feed back into each other. Understanding others helps refine our self-concept, our social identity. It's like Cooley's looking glass self, seeing ourselves through how we think others see us.
And finally, psychology looks at how our self-concept, what we believe about ourselves, interacts with our wider belief systems.
Deeply interconnected, yeah. Our self-esteem, self-efficacy, they shape how we interpret the world. And our belief systems, values, convictions provide the framework and goals that shape our identity. It's a dynamic loop forming our worldview.
So psychology gives us this really rich, detailed picture of the inner workings, the cognitive and social processes behind human identification.
It really does. And now, maybe we zoom out again. Look at the cultural and historical context, how these ideas play out across different societies and times.
That individualism versus collectivism contrast seems huge here.
Definitely. It's a major dimension of cultural difference with profound impacts on self-concept and identity.
Individualistic cultures, like many in the West, emphasize autonomy, uniqueness, the independent self.
Right. Defined by internal attributes, individual goals are paramount.
Whereas collectivistic cultures, often non-Western, prioritize group harmony, interdependence, the interdependent self.
Exactly. Defined more by relationships, social roles, fitting in is valued.
This shows up in research, like that 20 statements test.
People from collectivistic backgrounds tend to list more social roles and groups when asked, "Who am I?" Those from individualistic backgrounds list more personal traits. Even simple things like choosing a pen color unique versus common can reflect these values.
And it affects identity formation in adolescence, too. More focus on individual exploration in some cultures, more on fitting into roles in others.
Yes, the experience can be quite different. It's a good reminder that the Western idea of the autonomous self isn't the only way to be.
And culture even affects those really early milestones, like mirror self-recognition.
It was quite surprising to see that, yeah, the MARC test results vary. Lower pass rates in some non-Western samples, sometimes different reactions like freezing instead of touching the mark.
So the test itself might not be culturally universal.
It suggests that, yeah, cultural values, parenting, familiarity with mirrors, they might all influence how self-recognition is expressed. It implies human identification is culturally shaped from a very young age.
Co-constructed, as this source puts it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even in adolescence, while the stage might be universal, the content of identity, what's important, the balance of autonomy versus community expectations, that varies hugely. We need to be wary of that weird bias in psychology research.
Assuming Western experience is the default.
Right. Self-discovery might be central in one place, fulfilling community roles in another.
Absolutely. And it's so important to look beyond Western philosophy, too, like Ubuntu.
Yes. African philosophy, that core idea, Ubuntu, a person is a person through other people.
Such a different emphasis, the relational self.
Totally. Interconnectedness is fundamental. Personhood isn't just inherent, it's achieved through community participation, compassion, respect. Ethics are collective dignity, solidarity, harmony.
And then Buddhism offers another radical alternative with anatta, no self.
The idea that there's no permanent, unchanging soul or self, it's an illusion, and clinging to it causes suffering.
So the self is just these constantly changing aggregates, Form, sensation, perception.
The 5 skandhas, yes. All impermanent anicca. Understanding this, realizing anatta, is key to liberation. It definitely makes you think about that question. Is life itself a human identification? Maybe life is the absence of a fixed self.
And indigenous knowledge systems often have holistic relational views, too.
Very much so. Deep interconnectedness with community, family, ancestors, land, nature, spirit. Cultural identity values, language, traditions is foundational. Often dynamic, place-based, passed down through generations, and often a really nuanced balance of autonomy and interdependence in raising children.
It really drives home that these concepts, self, personhood, aren't fixed. They evolve with history, society, science, psychology. Human identification is always in flux.
Absolutely. Which brings us neatly to AI. How does this new lens change things? What can AI tell us?
Well, AI is getting pretty good at detecting things associated with our inner states, right? Emotions from faces, voices, text, analyzing behavior patterns.
Artificial behavior intelligence, yeah. Trying to model and predict human actions, like autonomous cars predicting pedestrians or service robots interacting.
But, and this is a big but, it's based on algorithms and data, not actual subjective experience or consciousness.
Crucial distinction. AI lacks genuine understanding, struggles with context, nuance, sarcasm. It's not real emotional intelligence.
And the main AI approach seems to be this theory, learning patterns to attribute mental states rather than having an innate understanding.
Right. It's pattern matching, fundamentally different from human intuition or empathy.
Which highlights the gap in what identification means for us versus AI, like interpreting laughter or crying.
For us, it's rich with context, empathy, history, culture. For AI, it's labeling based on data patterns.
Yeah, think about humor. AI might detect laughter, but why something is funny? The subjectivity, culture, social dynamics, that's much harder.
Exactly. AI gives an external analytical explanation, not that internal felt understanding.
Still, the source suggests AI could potentially help us understand ourselves better, enhance well-being, even grapple with life and death.
There's potential, yeah. Sentiment tracking apps, AI for practicing social skills, personalized learning, mental wellness chatbots, tools to augment our self-awareness and wisdom.
Though we need to be careful, right? Aiming for constant positive feeling isn't realistic or healthy. Maybe AI's role is more about fostering resilience and emotional intelligence.
That seems more valuable, yes. And for the big existential questions, AI could synthesize diverse human perspectives, philosophy, religion, science, culture, help clarify beliefs, maybe develop coping mechanisms.
Speculatively, an AI focused on life preservation might offer interesting insights, or more practically, help with digital legacies.
Possibly. Facilitate exploring themes of identity and mortality.
And what about that listener concern, reliance, over-reliance on AI?
Well, interestingly, AI could potentially help manage that. Analyze interaction patterns for unhealthy dependence.
Or synthesize research to teach us about the biases that lead to over-reliance.
Right. And crucially, AI can be designed to empower, to augment our skills and promote critical thinking, not just replace judgment. Healthy reliance should be the goal.
So AI might offer some limited insight into who is laughing, crying, angry, using its models, and it can definitely synthesize information about the purpose of human identification.
But the ethical side of all this needs serious thought.
Absolutely. Let's pivot to that. The moral landscape. Empathy seems central again.
It really does. A cornerstone of moral behavior. Lack of empathy is linked to antisocial behavior and dehumanization.
Viewing others as less than human, often a precursor to terrible things.
It strips away that fundamental human identification required for moral consideration. Believing in our shared humanity seems necessary for a moral society to function.
Which loops back to that listener point about the necessity of believing in it. Without that shared recognition, ethics crumble.
And having an identity brings benefits well-being, purpose, but also burdens. Formation can be stressful, different parts of our identity can conflict, and stigma brings negative experiences. And how we deal with it varies hugely based on resources, culture, psychology.
That thought experiment, again, being born without human identification. Developmentally catastrophic, probably. Philosophically challenging for personhood concepts like locks.
Though, again, the Buddhist view sees lacking a fixed identity as liberation, not deficit.
And the question about teaching kids to deal with identification, well, a lot is learned implicitly, right?
Yeah.
Socialization.
Huge amounts. Family, peers, schools, culture, transmitting values, roles. Indigenous cultures often use storytelling ceremony very intentionally for this.
And formal education has things like social-emotional learning, ethics, history, teaching respect, rights, diversity. But maybe it's not always explicit enough about the process of identification itself.
Perhaps there are gaps, yeah. Now, bringing AI back in the ethics are complex. AI isn't emotionally intelligent or moral.
And bias in data leads to biased AI identification, discrimination.
Big risk. Plus over-reliance, undermining autonomy, potential for deception, manipulation.
And using AI for huge life decisions. End of life.
Yeah.
Massive ethical questions.
Definitely. Requires ongoing scrutiny, regulation, development focused on human dignity and complexity.
So given all this labyrinth,
Yeah.
how do we navigate it better? What helps?
Well, enhancing our own human capacities feels key. Self-awareness, emotional intelligence, cross-cultural understanding.
Things like slowing down self-reflection, tuning into nonverbal, seeking different perspectives.
Exactly. And AI might offer support feedback, simulations, but the core work is ours.
And boosting cross-cultural understanding seems vital. Learning about different frameworks, individualism, collectivism, Ubuntu, Anatta.
Broadens perspectives, challenges assumptions, empowering our intrinsic abilities with AI as a tool, not a crutch.
And how do we use AI positively while managing over-reliance?
Designed for empowerment, augmenting, not replacing. Educate users about the psychology of reliance, cognitive biases, build in ethical feedback, meet underlying needs in balanced ways.
What about achieving a better logic for life, as the listener asked? AI probably won't give us the answer.
Unlikely. But it could synthesize diverse wisdom, philosophy, spirituality, science, culture. Maybe facilitate reflection, Socratic-style questioning.
Help us clarify our own values.
Yeah.
And maybe help navigate dealing with identification at death, accessing views on grief, mortality, cultural practices.
Potentially. The better logic is likely personal integration, reason, emotion, ethics, culture, meaning. AI could broaden access, aid integration.
And that final point about the experiment of life, survival, and quality. Our handling of human identification is central to quality, isn't it?
Absolutely. Self-awareness, connection, purpose. They are key to well-being. AI might help sustain life, medicine, health, and quality, assistive tech, learning, wellness.
Like vitamins for survival, but understanding ourselves for a quality life. Layered needs.
A good analogy. It highlights the depth involved.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear human identification is just incredibly complex, incredibly significant, a multifaceted tapestry.
Woven through our lives, our history. Profound stuff.
And this quest for meaning, for self-understanding, it's just an enduring human thing, isn't it? We keep grappling with it.
We do. And AI, as we've seen, might play various roles. A mirror, a tool, maybe a limited partner in that exploration.
But we always need to navigate that tension, the universal human aspects versus the diverse, culturally specific expressions.
Definitely. And looking forward, so much more to explore. More cross-cultural work, ethical AI development, more collaboration between disciplines.
Neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, anthropology.
And really cultivating human wisdom in this age of AI.
Absolutely. So for you listening, perhaps take a moment to reflect. How has this discussion maybe shifted your own understanding of human identification?
What new questions about yourself, your identity, what it means to be a person might you explore now?
Think about that balance, your unique self and your deep connections to others, to the world. It's a lifelong exploration.
This is DigitView.